The Williams Innovations building never slept. During the day, the corridors filled with the rhythmic sound of footsteps hitting the polished floor, the measured voices of executives, and the gleam of monitors reflecting multi-million-dollar strategies. At night, however, another reality emerged. The luxurious offices were still there, but the protagonists of the scene changed. They were cleaners, security guards, maintenance technicians, the invisible ones. People who ensured that when the sun rose, everything would be impeccable so that the high-level decision-makers could continue with their plans. That night, among them, there was a newcomer. No one knew it, but that fragile woman, wearing a simple uniform and rubber gloves, was the future CEO of the company. Jasmine Williams, or rather Janet, felt the weight of the mop in her hands. It wasn't the first time she faced challenges, but this was different. At Harvard Business School, she had led projects, negotiated investments, and debated with some of the world's brightest economists. But never in her 29 years had she held a dirty bucket at 3 a.m. or smelled the nauseating odor of chemicals seeping into her clothes. With her hair hidden beneath a cheap cap and wearing fake reading glasses, she barely recognized herself in the reflection on the glass doors. Her heart raced, not from fear of being discovered, but because, for the first time, she was about to see her own company from a new perspective. The night shift always began the same way. Shortly before midnight, the cleaning staff gathered in the maintenance room to receive the day's instructions. It was a small, stifling space, with shelves of cleaning products and a constant smell of cheap disinfectant. Jasmine, or Janet, as everyone already called her, leaned discreetly against the wall while watching her co-workers. It wasn't long before she noticed the exhaustion etched on their faces. Heavy eyes, hunched backs, calloused hands. These were people who worked unseen, making sure that the offices shone in the morning without anyone noticing their effort. In the center of the room, holding a worn clipboard, was Tomas, an older gentleman with graying hair and a gaze that seemed to carry more stories than he would ever share. He was the cleaning supervisor, and unlike the executives Jasmine knew, he spoke directly to the employees, bluntly, yet with evident respect. Today's work, the floors from the 10th to the 15th require special attention. Someone complained about the condition of the meeting tables, so they must be cleaned twice. Also, there is an event tomorrow on the 20th floor, so get moving. Oh, and watch out for Hayes today. He's already arrived stressed and is taking it out on us. The name Hayes made some employees roll their eyes. Jasmine didn't need to ask to understand. He was a problem, and by all appearances, a recurring one. Jasmine grabbed her cleaning cart and headed into the corridor, feeling the chill of the floor beneath her worn sneakers. The company her father had built seemed different at that hour. Without the elegant suits, luxury watches, and calculated smiles, the cold corridors revealed the true face of the place. The lights were partially off, casting strange shadows against the glass walls. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the hum of computers in standby mode and the occasional noise of someone cleaning another floor. It was a scenario she had never seen before, and at that moment she realized the obvious. She had never stopped to think about how Williams Innovations operated after hours. Her first task that night was to clean the meeting room on the 12th floor, one of many she had visited before as an executive. Now, however, it was different. The high-quality leather chairs didn't seem so imposing when she had to push them by herself, one by one, to reach the glass table, which was full of fingerprints and coffee splashes. The trash cans overflowed with disposable cups and crumpled paper scraps. In one corner of the room, an envelope fallen from the bin carried the digital signature of $1 million contract, a cruel reminder of the distance between those two realities. She swallowed hard. There, no one called her Mrs. Williams. No one even looked at her. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be invisible. Jasmine finished emptying the trash and was about to mop the table when she heard heavy footsteps approaching. She looked up just in time to see a tall man with broad shoulders and a perfectly tailored suit enter the room without noticing her presence. The badge hanging from his jacket pocket read Gerald Hayes. Although she hadn't met him personally before, the name was enough to cause a knot in the stomach of the night shift employees. He wasn't just a strict boss. He was a man who fed on the submission of others. He hurried across the room, grumbling as he typed something on his cell phone. Then, as if suddenly realizing someone was there, he stopped and stared intently at Jasmine. His gaze traveled from head to toe, as if evaluating a defective piece of furniture. You. The word was spat out with disdain. Are you still here? This should have been clean half an hour ago. If I come back and see dirt on this table, forget about the rest of the night. Without giving her any chance to respond, he turned and left the room, leaving behind a strong scent of expensive cologne mixed with evident arrogance in every step. Jasmine clenched the cloth in her hands, feeling anger bubbling in her chest. But all she could do was lower her head and continue cleaning. As soon as Hayes left, Jasmine exhaled deeply, not realizing she had been holding her breath. That man spoke as if she were an object, something worthless, disposable. She had already heard stories about toxic leaders in the company, but she never imagined that the disdain would be so evident. If he spoke like that about someone he considered a mere cleaner, how would he treat the other lower-level employees? She finished cleaning the room quickly and pushed the cart into the corridor, where she met Martha, a short woman with curly hair tucked under a faded cap. Her eyes were tired but full of a gentleness that contrasted with the building's coldness. "Did Hayes give you a hard time?" Martha asked quietly as she adjusted the weight of the mop on her shoulder. Jasmine just nodded, at a loss for words. Martha smiled sadly. "Don't worry. He does that to everyone. The trick is not to draw attention. The less he remembers that we exist, the better." Jasmine wanted to retort, to say something that would defy that cruel logic. But what could she say? For Martha and the others, this was just another normal day. They had accepted that being treated as invisible was the price to keep their jobs. The idea tightened her chest. How could someone work every day in a place where they were constantly disrespected? Before she could think further about it, a new order came over the radio clipped to her waist. "Cleaning team, someone spilled coffee on Derek Phillips' carpet. I need a volunteer." Jasmine was still getting used to the weight of the radio and hesitated for a second. That was enough for Martha to step forward. "I'll handle it." But before Martha could leave, Jasmine grabbed a roll of paper towels and stepped ahead. "Leave it to me. I need to learn how to deal with these things, right?" Jasmine traversed the corridors toward Derek Phillips' office, clutching the cleaning supplies firmly. Her heart pounded, not so much because of the work itself, but due to the anticipation of what was to come. Since beginning her undercover shift, she realized that the greatest challenges did not come from the physical labor, but from the way she was treated. And, judging by the tone of the radio message, that situation was not going to be different. She knocked softly on the door and entered. Philip's office was an excess of luxury and disorder, piles of scattered papers, empty water bottles in one corner, and in the center of the beige carpet, a huge stain of freshly spilled coffee. Derek stood with his arms crossed, watching her with an expression of pure disinterest. "Finally," he murmured, without even looking up from his cell phone. "It was about time. Come on, clean that quickly. I have a meeting in 20 minutes and I don't want any trace of this mess." Jasmine took a deep breath and knelt beside the stain, pulling out a cloth and spraying cleaner on the carpet. Each of her movements was observed by Derek Phillips's impatient gaze, who didn't bother to hide his disdain. He continued typing on his cell phone while pacing the office, letting out exaggerated sighs, as if his presence there was an annoyance. With each passing second, it became more evident what kind of person he was. While scrubbing the stain, without warning, Derek kicked one of the empty water bottles that was in the corner, causing it to roll in his direction. "Since it's on the floor, take the opportunity and pick that one up too," he said, without even looking her in the eyes. Jasmine felt a wave of anger rush down her spine. He didn't even try to hide his contempt. To him, she wasn't a person. She was just an extension of the carpet he was cleaning. Jasmine gritted her teeth and picked up the empty bottle with her fingertips, tossing it into the trash bin attached to the cart. Inside, her blood was boiling. She had already faced challenging situations in high-level negotiations, where psychological games were as cruel as any physical humiliation. But there, in that artificially lit office, the power did not reside in the sharp words of an investor, nor in the calculating look of a competitor. It lay in the way a man like Derek Phillips believed he could treat people. While scrubbing the carpet, she felt his gaze burning into the back of her neck, as if he were just waiting for her to make a mistake. "I hope you're really cleaning it," he murmured, not caring if she heard him or not. "Last time they left a stain, and I had to ask for it to be redone. These cleaning employees these days are a mess." Jasmine paused for a second, swallowing the acidic reply she wanted to give. He spoke as if she wasn't there, as if she were deaf, mute, and insignificant. When she finished, she slowly stood up and looked at Derek, waiting for some indication that the work had been accepted. But he didn't even lift his eyes from his cell phone. He simply motioned toward the door with a lazy gesture. "You can leave," he said, as if dismissing a ghost. The lack of a simple thank you was an unexpected blow. Not because she expected gratitude, but because it was a cruel reminder of how things really worked there. Leaving the office, she felt the fresh air of the corridor and took a deep breath. Every interaction like that was a test of her patience. But instead of demotivating her, it only reinforced her purpose. If they treated a simple cleaner like that, What else was happening inside when no one was watching? She knew she had to keep going, observe, record, and above all, resist. Jasmine continued down the corridor with quick steps, still feeling the weight of the recent humiliation. She had already dealt with investors who underestimated her, with colleagues who tried to belittle her work for being a young woman in a prominent position, but she had never been treated as something less than human. Now, dressed in a cleaning uniform, she wasn't a promising executive. She wasn't the heiress of a multi-million-dollar company. She wasn't Robert Williams's daughter. She was invisible. She stopped next to a large glass window and looked at her reflection. What she saw was not the Jasmine she knew. Her face looked tired. Strands of hair escaped from under her cap, and the cheap fabric of the uniform appeared wrinkled after hours of work. But what really bothered her was how she felt there. The confidence she always carried on her shoulders had turned into a knot of uncertainty in her chest. After all, how much did she really know about her company? She had always believed in her father's mission: innovation, integrity, respect. But now she began to wonder if those values still existed beyond the well-rehearsed speeches for investors. A movement at the end of the corridor caught her attention. It was Veronica Wells. The senior vice president of sales roamed the halls as if she owned the building, her heels echoing on the polished floor, and her severe expression denoted the weight of the world on her shoulders. Jasmine watched as Veronica crossed the meeting room door and slammed it behind her. The tension on her face made it clear that something was not right. Moments later, another voice broke the silence. "Hey, Janet!" Jasmine turned around and saw Martha approaching with a mop in one hand and a water bottle in the other. "How's your first night going?" The question was accompanied by a friendly tone, but there was something more. As if deep down, Martha was asking whether she had already understood how that world really worked. Jasmine forced a smile and took the bottle. "I think so, but..." She glanced toward the meeting room door, from where Veronica had entered moments before. "Has it always been like this here? I mean, this atmosphere, this tension?" Martha sighed, leaning the mop against the wall. "Always. But I think it's intensified lately. The bosses seem nervous, and when they get tense, we suffer." That answer ignited something within Jasmine. "What do you mean?" Martha shrugged. "I don't know exactly, but you can feel it in the air, you know? Something is happening behind the scenes." Jasmine gripped the bottle even tighter. She was already aware of the suspicions of corruption in management, but hearing the employees talk about growing tension only reinforced that something was very wrong. Before she could ask further, a loud noise was heard at the end of the corridor. The meeting room door burst open and Veronica came out, furious, walking briskly while speaking on the phone. "If this gets public, we're screwed, understood? I need guarantees, or this whole thing is going down once and for all." Jasmine exchanged a quick glance with Martha. That was a sign. And although she knew a long night still awaited her, her mind was already racing, trying to piece together the parts of that dark puzzle. The freight elevator stopped on the 15th floor with a slight jolt. The doors opened to reveal a silent, barely lit corridor. The financial department of Williams Innovations was known for its impeccable spreadsheets, meticulous reports, and a constant air of tension. It was one of the most important departments in the company, as it directly controlled investments, earnings, and operating costs. Jasmine pushed the cart out of the elevator and soon saw the cause of the alert. A sticky puddle of soda had spread across the floor near the entrance of one of the rooms. Next to the stain, an overflowing trash bin contained crumpled papers, empty coffee cups, and food remnants. She sighed and bent down to start cleaning, but was interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor. Looking up, she saw a man standing a few meters away, Gerald Hayes. His gaze fixed on her as if he were examining a defective piece. "What are you doing here?" he said in a cutting tone full of disdain. Jasmine took a deep breath and replied calmly, "I was called to clean up the mess in the elevator." Hayes frowned, crossing his arms. "And where are the others? Or is it that now anyone takes on the dirty work?" His tone ignited something inside her, but she maintained a neutral expression. "I'm just doing my job." He let out a dry laugh. "Then hurry up. This floor is no place to waste time." Jasmine lowered her head and returned to work, but she felt his eyes fixed on her back for a few seconds before he finally moved on. The discomfort was almost palpable. When she finished, she pushed the cart back to the elevator. But before pressing the button, something caught her eye. A scrap of paper had fallen to the floor near the overflowing trash bin. She bent down and picked up the crumpled document. As she unfolded it, her stomach churned. It was a financial memo, an excerpt of a transaction with absurdly high values, directed to an unknown account. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. This was proof. She held the document for a few seconds, feeling a tingling in her fingers. She didn't know exactly what she was looking at, but she knew it was important. The bank account indicated in the excerpt had no clear identification, just a numerical sequence and an amount bordering on the absurd. Millions of dollars being moved back and forth without any apparent justification. Quickly, she folded the paper and hid it in the pocket of her uniform. The risk of being caught with that was real. If anyone saw her handling the company's financial documents, she could be fired in seconds with no chance to complete her mission. But her instinct told her that this paper was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. She needed to uncover more. The elevator doors opened and she stepped in, pressing the button for the cleaning sector floor. As the doors closed, her heart continued pounding against her ribs. The adrenaline, mixed with frustration and exhaustion, made her whole body protest. She never thought that a single night working as a cleaner could be so exhausting, not because of the physical effort, but because of the way she was treated. When she reached the supply depot, Martha was organizing some products on the shelves. "So, did you survive on the 15th floor?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the boxes. Jasmine hesitated for a moment. "It was interesting." Martha let out a low laugh and finally turned to look at her. "You tell me everything later, okay? Because if you just walk out now, it'll be noticed. But if we do it the right way, no one will suspect a thing." Jasmine nodded, waiting for further instructions. She had never had to escape from a building she owned before. It was a cruel irony. Someone who knew every detail of the place. And now she needed help from a lower-level employee to get out without raising suspicion. Martha looked around and lowered her voice. "Go to the uniform depot on the 3rd floor. There's an emergency exit there that no one uses because it leads directly to the waste area. The camera there has been broken for months, so no one will see you leave." Jasmine processed the information quickly. It was risky, but it was her best chance. "And you?" Jasmine asked. Martha gave a slight smile. "I've got you covered. If they ask for you, I'll say you felt sick and went to the bathroom. And if anyone acts suspiciously, I'll take care of spilling a bucket of water in the corridor so they have something more urgent to deal with." Jasmine chuckled softly, feeling an unexpected warmth in her chest. Martha didn't have to do that, but she was. Jasmine stood up, adjusted her cap, and grabbed the cleaning cart so as not to look suspicious along the way. Every step was a mix of tension and urgency. She continued down the corridor, trying to appear casual. At every corner, she expected to see Hayes or Veronica appear, but fortunately, the path was clear. The building's old elevator took its time arriving. Every second of waiting seemed like an eternity. When the doors finally opened, Jasmine stepped in and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. Her heart pounded fiercely. If anyone discovered her there, it would be the end. The doors opened, and Jasmine quickly exited, heading directly to the uniform depot. The atmosphere was dark and filled with metal shelves. In the back, the emergency door, her escape. She took a deep breath and placed her hand on the handle. But before she could turn it, a cold voice resonated behind her. "I knew there was something off about you." Jasmine froze. Slowly, she turned around and found herself face to face with Veronica Wells. The executive's smile was as sharp as a knife. "And now, dear Janet, why don't you tell me who you really are?" A shiver ran down Jasmine's spine like an electric current. Veronica looked at her with a predatory expression, arms crossed and a slight smile on her face. Unlike Hayes, who acted impulsively and aggressively, Veronica was the type to analyze, plan, and only strike when she was sure to win. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Veronica tilted her head slightly, feigning curiosity. "Because look, I know that cleaners usually don't have access to restricted areas. I also know that real cleaners don't eavesdrop on hallway conversations or hide in places where they shouldn't be." Jasmine maintained a neutral expression, but her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She needed to get out of there, but any hasty movement could worsen the situation. Veronica stepped forward, her heels clacking on the concrete floor. "You know what your problem is, dear? You thought you were smarter than everyone else, but I already knew someone was snooping around here. I just didn't imagine it would be a curious cleaner." She smiled coldly and continued, "So, before I call Hayes and we settle this once and for all, why don't you make things easier and tell me where you come from?" Jasmine felt cold sweat forming on the back of her neck. If Veronica called Hayes, he could search her belongings and find the cell phone with the evidence. She needed to think quickly. She had to turn the situation around. With a conscious effort, Jasmine relaxed her shoulders and forced a defiant smile. "All right, you caught me. I'm much more than a simple cleaner." Veronica raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? Then who exactly are you?" Jasmine stepped forward, reducing the distance between them. "What I am doesn't matter. What matters is what I know." The change in her stance caught Veronica off guard for a moment. but she quickly composed herself. "And what do you think you know exactly?" Jasmine tilted her head and offered an enigmatic smile. "That Williams Innovations is rotten to the core, that you and your friends are erasing evidence of illicit transactions, and that if I disappear, it will only raise more suspicions." Veronica's smile faltered for a second. She knew that was true. Taking advantage of the hesitation, Jasmine continued. "Now, tell me, is it really worth getting your hands dirty with this?" The atmosphere in the depot grew dense. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, to Jasmine's surprise, Veronica let out a low laugh. "You're good, I'll admit. But not as good as you think." She leaned forward, her gaze filled with a dark warning. "Do you really think you're in control here? That a clever conversation will save you? You have no idea who you're messing with, dear. But don't worry, you'll find out very soon." Jasmine didn't reply. She just needed to get out, and she had to do it now. She gripped the cell phone in her pocket and steeled herself. The game was far from over. But at that moment, her priority was to escape and ensure that her next move would be even deadlier. Jasmine felt cold sweat trickle down her neck as Veronica looked at her with that predatory gaze. She knew she had to leave immediately, but any misstep could cost her dearly. Veronica already suspected her, and there was no doubt that if she let any wrong information slip, the consequences would be severe. The emergency door was less than 2 meters away. If she managed to distract Veronica for just a few seconds, she could escape before the executive could call Hayes or someone else. But how? Then, an idea struck her. Risky, but the only viable one at that moment. Jasmine let out a low laugh, crossed her arms, and tilted her head, imitating the same air of superiority that Veronica usually exhibited. "You know, Veronica, you look worried." The woman frowned. "Worried? About you?" Jasmine stepped forward, choosing her words carefully. "Yes, because if you weren't, you wouldn't have come looking for me on your own. If you really believed I was just a conceited cleaner, you would have sent Hayes to handle it. But you came in person. What does that tell you? That deep down, you know I'm a problem." For a brief second, Jasmine saw a flicker of hesitation in Veronica's eyes. That was all she needed. Without giving the executive time to react, Jasmine grabbed one of the uniform carts from the side and forcefully pushed it toward Veronica. The impact surprised the woman, making her stagger backward, and her heel slipped on the smooth floor. It was enough. Jasmine spun on her heels and pulled the emergency door open, dashing through it at full speed. The cold early morning air hit her face as she descended the metal steps of the service exit. Every step echoed in the silence of the night, but she did not look back. There was no time to doubt. She leapt over the last step and emerged in the company's waste area, where large industrial garbage containers were piled up. The place was empty, just as expected. The security camera, as Martha had warned, was broken. She ran to the end of the alley and exited through the side entrance, where the supplier trucks usually parked. As soon as her foot hit the sidewalk, her body still trembling with adrenaline, she knew she had made it. But the victory was temporary. Now, Veronica and Hayes knew that someone was snooping among their secrets. Jasmine glanced at the cell phone in her pocket. She had enough evidence to shake the very foundations of the company. But the real battle was yet to come. She took a deep breath, feeling her heartbeat gradually slow. The game had changed, and now she dictated the rules. Jasmine walked along the sidewalk, trying to appear as normal as possible, even though her body still trembled with adrenaline. She had managed to escape, for now. But she knew that Veronica and Hayes wouldn't take it lightly. Time was running out, and now she needed a concrete plan. She took the cell phone and reviewed the recording she had made in the server room. Every click of Hayes deleting files was there. But that, by itself, wasn't enough. They could claim it was a routine procedure, that they were just organizing the company's financial documents. No, she needed something more, irrefutable evidence. Her eyes scanned the street in front of her. There was only one place to go now. She hailed a taxi and gave the address. Not to her home, not even to a hotel. She was going to see the one person who could help her bring down the corrupt figures inside Williams Innovations. The car stopped in front of a small commercial building in the city center. Jasmine got out quickly and entered, climbing the stairs without looking back. She stopped in front of a frosted glass door with a discreet plaque. Ethan Carter, Corporate Investigation. Jasmine took a deep breath and knocked. Seconds later, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard and shrewd eyes opened the door. "Ethan," she said bluntly, "I need your help." The investigator looked at her for a moment before opening the door wider and gesturing for her to enter. Jasmine walked past him and collapsed into the nearest chair. "I discovered something big, and if I don't act fast, they'll erase all the evidence." Ethan crossed his arms, evaluating her. Tell me everything from the beginning. Jasmine took out the cell phone and opened the files. Hayes was deleting the company's financial records. Veronica mentioned that if the information leaked, we'd be screwed. That means something much bigger is happening behind the scenes? Ethan paused for a second and looked up at her. And you want to know where that money went? Jasmine nodded. And more than that, I want enough proof to take them all down. The investigator sighed and returned his attention to the screen. All right, first, let's see if we can track those transactions before Hayes wipes everything. Jasmine felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew she didn't have much time. Ethan was typing frantically, his eyebrows furrowed in concentration. He opened multiple windows on the system, running algorithms to try to recover recent records. Minutes passed in tense silence until he finally stopped and leaned back in his chair. I found something. Jasmine leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. There was a series of recent transfers, all directed to offshore accounts. These amounts were siphoned from internal company funds and laundered through fake subsidiaries, Ethan explained, pointing to the numbers. This is a fairly sophisticated scheme. They hide the money by moving it between temporary accounts until it disappears. Jasmine felt her blood boil. And can that be proven? Ethan nodded. Yes, but we need one final move. If we manage to capture a transaction in real time, with active records, it will be impossible for them to escape the charges. Jasmine exhaled slowly. Then, we need one last move. Ethan looked at her with a slight smile. And I think I know exactly how to do it. He rotated the laptop screen so Jasmine could see, his eyes sparkling with that mix of excitement and tension that only comes from discovering something big. The best way to catch them is to capture a transaction in real time. We need to access the system just at the moment they are moving the money. Jasmine crossed her arms, thoughtful. But Hayes is already deleting records. How do we know any of them are still active? Ethan opened a detailed graph of banking flows. Because these kinds of movements don't happen all at once. They follow a pattern. Small amounts are transferred over days or weeks to avoid audit alerts. If we analyze those patterns, we can predict when the next transaction will occur. Jasmine studied the screen, absorbing the information. And if we know when they're going to transfer more money, we can intercept it and gather proof. Ethan nodded. Exactly. But here's the problem. To access these transactions in real time, someone needs to be inside the company. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying I need to go back? Ethan offered a tense smile. If you want to catch them in the act, yes. You'll have to infiltrate again. The idea was absurd. Jasmine had barely managed to leave the building without being caught, and now she was considering going back. But at the same time, she knew it was her only real chance to take down Hayes, Veronica, and Derek once and for all. She took a deep breath, feeling the tension build. And how exactly am I going to get back in without being noticed? Ethan showed another map of the building on the screen. You're in luck. Tomorrow night, there's a scheduled delivery at the basement supply depot. If you manage to enter with the suppliers, you'll be able to access the network without raising suspicion. Jasmine ran her hands over her face, feeling the weight of the decision. That's crazy. Ethan laughed. It's dangerous. But you've come this far. Are you going to give up now? She shook her head. No, I want to end this. Ethan closed the laptop and stood up. Then prepare yourself. Tomorrow night, you go back to the lion's den. Jasmine spent the next few hours with Ethan, planning every detail of her return. This time, she couldn't afford any mistakes. If Hayes or Veronica saw her inside the building, there would be no doubt that she wasn't just a curious cleaner. They'd know she was onto them. Ethan pulled out a folder with documents and began explaining the plan. You'll need a different disguise. The night shift already knows you as Janet, the cleaner. So entering as such is out of the question. But the suppliers? They come and go without anyone paying much attention. Jasmine nodded. So I pretend to be a delivery person. Exactly. And besides, I managed to get you a uniform. One of the delivery drivers who works for one of Williams's supplying companies owes me a favor. I got your name on the delivery team list for tomorrow. You'll enter the building as part of the logistics team. Jasmine examined the fake badge he left on the table. Everything looked official. Name, position, even an identification code. She was really about to infiltrate again. The following night, Jasmine donned the new uniform, tied her hair back, and adjusted the cap of the supplying company. This time, her disguise was impeccable. Upon arriving at the building, she saw a truck parked at the side entrance. Logistics employees were unloading boxes while the guards checked the invoices. Jasmine took a deep breath and approached one of the men who appeared to be in charge of the team. Hi, I'm new to deliveries. Where do we take these? The supervisor, a robust man with a serious face, quickly checked the badge and nodded briefly. You go with that group over there. Take these boxes to the basement depot. She nodded and took one of the smaller boxes. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. Now, she was inside. It was time to obtain the final evidence and take down Hayes, Veronica, and Derek once and for all. Jasmine walked alongside the delivery group through the basement corridor, balancing the box in her arms and trying to appear as natural as possible. This was the most critical moment. If anyone suspected her, everything would be lost. She followed the rest of the employees until they reached the depot, where a security guard was checking the delivered packages. He looked at her a second longer than necessary and her stomach sank. Did he recognize her? The guard frowned but only gestured for her to continue. Jasmine exhaled the held breath and pressed on. The first barrier was overcome. Now she had to separate from the group and access the servers. If Ethan was right, that night a transaction was taking place, and she needed to capture the information before Hayes deleted it. She took advantage of a moment when the employees were distracted and slipped into a side corridor. Now, every second counted. Jasmine moved quickly through the underground corridors of Williams Innovations. This time, she knew exactly where to go. The access to the servers was just a few meters away, and if she managed to get into the records before Hayes deleted them, she would have the final piece of the puzzle. She turned a corner and abruptly stopped. Her heart raced. Veronica Wells was standing beside the server room, talking on the phone. What was she doing there? Jasmine hid behind a column and listened to the conversation. Yes, I know the movement was large, but we're erasing our tracks, Veronica was saying in a low, irritated voice. Hayes is already deleting what's necessary, but we have to be quick. This transaction is too big to leave any trace. Jasmine clenched her fists. That was it. They were finalizing the money diversion. She needed to enter that room, but first, she had to get Veronica out of the way. Jasmine knew she couldn't simply wait for Veronica to leave. Every second lost was an opportunity for Hayes to delete more evidence. She had to create a distraction, something that would allow her to get in without anyone noticing that someone was trying to access the server room. She looked around for something she could use. Then she saw a cart of electrical equipment parked near the entrance of the corridor. An idea struck her. Simple, but effective. Moving quickly, she grabbed a roll of adhesive tape from the cart and fixed one end to the nearest fire sensor. With a strong tug, it would trigger the alarm without causing an actual fire. She took a deep breath, making sure Veronica was still distracted on the phone. Then she pulled the tape forcefully. The alarm blared instantly, filling the entire basement with a shrill sound. Red lights began flashing, and an automated voice resonated over the speakers. Fire alert! Evacuation necessary. Veronica cursed and looked around, clearly irritated. She held the phone to her ear again. Damn it, I need to get out of here. Keep the process going. I'll call you when I'm safe. She hurriedly left down the corridor, following the evacuation protocol without noticing that Jasmine had remained hidden in the shadows. That was her chance. As soon as Veronica's footsteps faded, Jasmine ran toward the server room. She grabbed Ortega's access card, the same one she had used before, and swiped it at the reader. The green light flashed, and the door clicked open softly. She entered quickly, closing the door behind her. The atmosphere in the server room was cold, and the monitors blinked like stars in the darkness. She rushed to one of the terminals and typed in the administrator code her father used. The system loaded, and Jasmine went directly to the folder of financial transactions. Her eyes scanned the screens, searching for something suspicious. And then she found it. A transfer of $15 million had been scheduled to be sent to an offshore account in a matter of minutes. It was Hayes and Veronica's final blow, and the definitive proof of corruption within Williams Innovations. She grabbed her cell phone and began recording. Every number, every account, every detail. This time they wouldn't be able to erase anything. But then, she heard a noise behind her. The server room door opened abruptly, and when Jasmine turned around, her heart stopped. Gerald Hayes was there, his face grim and jaw set tight. So, it's you. The atmosphere in the room grew as heavy as lead. Jasmine didn't need a mirror to see that her face had gone pale. Gerald Hayes closed the door behind him and stepped forward, blocking the only exit. His eyes were cold, calculating, and above all, dangerously serene. So, it's you, he repeated in a low voice laced with veiled threat. I knew someone was snooping where they shouldn't, but I never thought it would be a cleaner. Jasmine gripped the cell phone in her hand. She already had what she needed, the definitive proof of the corruption. But now she had to get out alive to use it. I don't know what you're talking about, she tried to lie, sliding the cell phone discreetly back into her uniform pocket. But Hayes wasn't foolish. He took a step forward, squinting. Do you think I'm an idiot? You entered this room, accessed confidential files, and apparently even recorded something. Tell me, what do you expect to do with that? Jasmine maintained a firm gaze. What any decent person would do. Expose you. For a moment, Hayes simply observed her. Then he let out a laugh. You're naive. Do you really think you stand a chance against me? I am one of the pillars of this company. If I fall, I drag many people with me. And you know what's worse? You have nowhere to run. Jasmine felt her blood boil, but she stayed calm. She knew Hayes was lying. Maybe that would be true if I were alone, she said slowly, keeping her gaze fixed on him. But I'm not. Hayes' smile vanished. I'm not just a cleaner, and I'm not insignificant. I am Jasmine Williams. The ensuing silence was deafening. Hayes' face lost its color. Jasmine stepped forward, adrenaline pulsing in her veins. And now, who do you think they'll believe? The right-hand man of the biggest corruption scheme in this company? Or the future CEO of Williams Innovations? Hayes opened his mouth, but no words came out. Now he knew. Taking advantage of the confusion, Jasmine pulled the cell phone from her pocket. And in case you're wondering, yes, I recorded everything. Not just here, but over the past 2 weeks. I have enough proof to take you down, along with Veronica and Derek. She moved toward the door, passing him without fear. Now the power was hers. If I were you, Gerald, she said while grasping the handle, I'd start looking for a good lawyer. She opened the door and left without looking back. The war was about to end, and she had won. Jasmine exited the server room with determined steps, even though her heart still raced. She knew Hayes wouldn't sit still. He would try to reverse the situation, run to Veronica and Derek, or even use his influence to silence everything before the bomb exploded. She needed to act quickly, and she knew exactly where to go. Without hesitation, she took the cell phone and called Ethan. I did it. I have the proof, but they'll react. I need you ready to expose it before they try to stop me. On the other end of the line, Ethan responded without hesitation. I'm ready. Send the files now. Jasmine quickly forwarded the videos, recordings, and screenshots to Ethan's secure email. Now, even if she lost the cell phone, the truth couldn't be erased. She exhaled deeply. It wasn't over yet. The final blow was still missing. She headed straight to the floor where the board meeting would take place that morning. That was where everything would be settled. The day dawned as Jasmine entered the grand boardroom of Williams Innovations. High-level executives were already seated, conversing among themselves, unaware that they were about to witness a scandal. Robert Williams, her father, sat at the head of the table, his gaze serious as it swept the room. He didn't know the details of what was happening, but Jasmine had sent a brief message that morning. Be in the meeting. Trust me. Then the door burst open. Veronica, Hayes, and Derek hurried in, their faces tense. Veronica was the first to speak, her voice laden with forced indignation. Mr. Williams, something very serious is happening. We've received information that someone is trying to sabotage the company with false corruption allegations. Jasmine smiled inwardly. They were trying to control the narrative, but it was too late. She stood slowly and placed the cell phone on the table. False allegations? She stared intently at Veronica. Then can you explain why I have videos of you and Hayes discussing the diversion of company funds? Or why I have recordings of transactions being deleted in real time? Silence fell over the room. Hayes' face hardened, but Veronica tried to maintain her composure. That's ridiculous. Where did you get those so-called proofs? Jasmine leaned forward. Where? From the very floor you forced me to clean. She slammed the table forcefully. I took control of the projector, and the evidence is now being displayed on the screen. The images spoke for themselves. The fraudulent transactions, the recordings of Hayes deleting files, the audio of Veronica confirming that they'd be screwed if the information leaked. The board was in shock. Robert Williams watched silently, his eyes fixed on the traitors of the company he had built. When the last recording ended, Jasmine crossed her arms and said in a firm voice, "You're all fired, and justice will take care of the rest." The impact of Jasmine's words thundered through the room. Veronica, Hayes, and Derek turned pale. For the first time, they were losing control of the situation. Robert Williams, who had remained silent until that moment, slowly stood up. With his eyes fixed on Hayes and a look as hard as stone, he said, "I built this company from scratch," he declared in a low, forceful voice. "I trusted you to honor that legacy. But instead, you have disgraced everything Williams Innovation stands for." Hayes attempted to retort. "Mr. Williams, this isn't what it looks like. These recordings might have been manipulated. This girl is trying to destroy everything we've built." Jasmine pounded the table, exhausted with patience. "Don't you dare talk about building anything, Hayes. You were only here to steal, manipulate, and destroy. She turned to the rest of the board. The evidence has been sent to an independent investigator. If anyone here thinks they can cover this up, think twice, because the information is already in the hands of the authorities. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. The game was over for them. Derek, seeing there was no escape, abruptly stood up. This is absurd. I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. My lawyer will be in touch. Veronica, however, maintained her composure. She looked at Jasmine with a cold, hateful stare. Congratulations, little girl, you've won, but this isn't over. Jasmine crossed her arms firmly. For you, it is. 2 guards entered the room at Robert Williams' command. Gerald Hayes, Veronica Wells, and Derek Phillips. You are formally fired from Williams Innovations. If you remain in the building for 5 more minutes, you will be escorted out. Hayes gritted his teeth, his eyes full of fury. You'll regret this. Jasmine smiled. The only thing I regret is not having discovered this sooner. They left the room under the silent stares of the remaining executives. Their reign had come to an end. Robert looked at Jasmine and for the first time smiled. I always knew you were the only one who could fix this. Jasmine exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of victory. Now it was time to rebuild the company, in the right way. She walked through the office on an ordinary workday and saw something different. The people looked each other in the eye. The fear that once lingered in the air had dissipated, replaced by something new: respect. She smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. But, for the first time, Williams Innovations truly belonged to everyone who contributed day by day. Upon reaching the cleaning staff's break room, she found Martha serving coffee, as she did every early morning. This time, when Martha looked at her, there was something different in her eyes, a recognition. So, Janet, Martha said with a slight smile, or should I say, Miss Williams. Jasmine smiled back, feeling that the disguise was finally fading. Just Jasmine is fine. Martha folded her arms. Then, what happens now? Jasmine took a sip of her coffee and replied, Now, we do it the right way. A month later, profound changes began to transform Williams Innovations. Jasmine officially assumed the role of CEO, and her first action was to review the entire company structure. The employees who had once been invisible now had a voice. A new whistleblower channel was created, allowing any abuse to be reported directly to an independent team. And for the first time, the lower-level workers had a real place in the company's strategic meetings. Gerald Hayes, Veronica Wells, and Derek Phillips faced severe legal proceedings, with federal investigations tracking every cent they diverted. Williams Innovations would no longer be an empire built on exploitation. It would now be a true symbol of innovation and integrity. Jasmine walked through the office on an ordinary workday and saw something different. The people looked each other in the eye. The fear that once hovered in the air had vanished, replaced by respect. She smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning, but for the first time, Williams Innovations truly belonged to everyone, and above all, it belonged to everyone who helped build it each day.